Welcome to Learn Literacy, the podcast that brings you inspiring conversations that focus on teaching literacy through language and structure. I am your host, Cheryl Urbanzik, an experienced educator and passionate advocate on a mission inspired by my family's experience with dyslexia. Each episode explores topics that help us understand how we can teach the language as it is to the student as they are. Tune in and become part of a community dedicated to supporting language for life. Everyone, and welcome to the Learn Literacy podcast. This is the place where we talk about language for life by teaching literacy through language and structure. I'm really excited today for this practitioner profile, and I'm here today with a fellow Peggy Price from Vermont. So welcome, Peggy. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to speak with you today, Cheryl.
So I know we're both very excited about OG. And when I started going to OG conferences, you were always there and you were someone I looked up to. So it's exciting to meet you and learn more about you. So why don't you share about your OG journey, how you learned about OG, what your own pathway was like, where you are now, that kind of thing.
I'd love to. And I would also say,
Mhm.
Cheryl, I'm a fellow admirer of your work as well. I'm so grateful for the community that the Orton-Gillingham Academy or OGA brings. So I first learned about Orton-Gillingham towards the end of my master's degree in special education. And I had an amazing professor who was new to the university at the time, Dr. Nicole Patenteri. It was a class where one of our texts was Speech to Print by Louisa Moats. The class started with a pre-test from that book. And, here I was, the straight A student. I had a background in ABA. I had started, I took my GREs my sophomore year, like I'm this go-getter and I'm going to be this great kindergarten teacher. And I took this pre-test and I did not know any of the sounds in the English language. I remember at one point thinking, I think I heard something once about long or short vowels, but I don't even know what that means. And that class changed my life, changed the trajectory of my career, and really introduced me to this term, or in Gillingham, and that learned through conversations that this is really the gold standard for reading instruction. I'm very fortunate that where I did my student teaching, they took a chance on me and hired me as a kindergarten special education teacher. And as soon as I could, my second year, I took my first Orton-Gillingham course, which was really geared towards classroom teachers, which fit my needs at the time. But I learned about this OGA and that there would be a certification process where someone would really observe me teach and give me feedback. So if it's okay, I want to go back to a moment to my younger self. And I mentioned this background and I mentioned ABA, applied behavior analysis. I knew from a really young age I wanted to work with kids, and I always had a deep passion for research and science. I've always, even in high school, it's like this big research nerd. And I even once had a teacher who was a developmental psychologist that really had a sibling at the school. And like it's a favorite of the school, taught us AP Psych, and she invited me to her research lab. And just the idea that we can use the scientific method to help children and families, that just was so fascinating and humbling to me. So I started at an early age in college working in research labs, and one was a lab school for children with autism where you could get this concentration and
Yeah.
applied behavior analysis. And there was constant observation, supervision, feedback on how you spoke to the child, how you phrased certain things, how you took data on the response. And I just saw that as a natural and normal process that was necessary if you were working with children, particularly those with significant needs. And to be honest, I was pretty disappointed that, well, I probably first disappointed my parents that at the last minute I said, I'm going to get this degree in education and I'm not going to go for this doctorate in clinical psychology that I told you since 18. That was my plan. And they're always very supportive. And I was so excited to learn so much more. And a lot of the classes I took were not as rigorous like the one with Dr. Nicole Patenteri. There was a lot of assignments where we were just expected to write how we feel. Um, and I remember often thinking, why does it matter how I feel? Shouldn't it matter the data, the outcome that we're getting from the student? Isn't that my job as a teacher? So when I learned that there was something like the OGA where someone would observe me and again give me this detailed level of feedback like I received in my college days, I knew this is what I wanted because this is what I needed to do to grow. I really wanted to. There's no worse feeling than as a teacher, you go into this field because you want to do right by kids. We don't go to this field for glory. We don't go for the paycheck. We go because we really care about helping children. And I hear from, I'll tell you a little bit where I am now training teachers. I hear from teachers every day that say the same thing that I felt is I want to have the tools to help this child who's struggling, to make this child feel like a reader because they are a reader and knowing the power that does for a child's self-esteem, for the trajectory of that person's life, and how it changes the whole family system too.
Yeah, no, that's so true. It's funny that you mentioned Louisa Motz's book because one of my first, before I took OG, I took a course that used that book, Speech to Print, and I didn't understand a thing about it. I read each chapter multiple times. It was like, it's like I was reading a different language or something like that. So it's amazing. And then I think going back and probably reading it now, it would make a lot more sense.
I had such a similar experience because that book is on the certified reading list. So I
Yeah.
did my associate level training at the time I was living in Atlanta. So I mentioned that I really love research. So just to hit that point home, I also worked in a marriage research lab for 3 years where I did my honors thesis. And I married a research assistant I met there who
Wow.
is also a researcher. So I'm not another research lover or research nerd. So his career in academia has brought me to different states
Right.
and locations. So I loved living in Atlanta and teaching at this amazing public school in DeKalb County that focused on early childhood inclusion. And school could not have been more supportive of me. They really encouraged me to learn about OG, bring it back to the school. The school was already implementing systematic phonics. And I think this is kind of one of my takeaways too is while we had a solid systematic phonics program at the school, it was universally accepted that programs are not perfect and that they will need more modifications based on teacher expertise. We really looked at the school SLPs or speech language pathologists as experts to help advise us. So I feel really lucky, like my background in just research methodology and really Nicole Patton-Terry's course in a way inoculated me from other graduate coursework that I had that promoted more of a whole language, look at the first picture and guess approach. So in that way, OG was just like this natural addition to what we were already doing at the school. And then so lucky to complete my associate level training in Atlanta, and life brought me to Charleston and brought me to Sheila Costello, who's a past OGA president. And I just really feel like over and over again, I won this lottery ticket as a teacher, as a professional, because I was put in schools and with other teachers and mentors with so much expertise, but also patience to take on this new person who didn't have a lot of knowledge, but I always had a lot of curiosity and humility. I'm a lifelong learner. I don't know if you can be humble and say you're humble, so that might be an oxymoron.
I think we both know the more you learn, it opens doors to more questions and more learning. And I think that's where it comes in because we just always, there's never an end point. So I have a question. It's maybe a little off script, but I just am wondering how you tie in like your research experience and your research mind to like that diagnostic prescriptive pieces of OG, because there aren't too many models of, let's say, teacher research. And I kind of see that diagnostic prescriptive as being your own kind of little researcher. But I think sometimes people have a hard time understanding those terms or exactly what it looks like because it's just such a different way of thinking.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. So I worked in these two research labs, and one where we were doing group-wise statistics, which means you're collecting statistics from a larger sample and analyzing them. But at the lab school, the focus was on single subject design, and that is very much at the heart of what we do in OG.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I'll just like give a case from ABA is maybe a child is engaging in a self-harming behavior like head banging or hurting themselves. And we have a base rate data of this is what this is. And we implement an intervention and we see, okay, now that behavior is decreasing. We see that it's working. And similarly, that is a similar approach that we take in OG. We get baseline data from a broad informal diagnostic assessment. And a lot of my role, I'll talk a little bit more about my role at the Stern Center for Language and Learning in Vermont, is we've created a lot of really excellent informal assessments to complement what else is available. And there's one test we've recently revised. I'd love to share a little bit more about a pseudo word
Yeah,
test that we've
definitely.
recently revised that scores for automaticity, not just word level reading accuracy. And then we develop a plan based on that initial
Right.
informal assessment. And in my role training teachers at the Stern Center, we actually, my staff and I, whoever's directly mentoring that specific teacher, actually we call something a starting points report. We've learned the hard way that it's not really fair to expect a brand new teacher to give those tests and then really fully milk the
I don't think
analysis.
the skill set is there yet to be like,
Exactly.
okay, data, what do I do? You're learning as well. Yeah.
Exactly. So we really go through that. We review all that data. Sometimes we're giving more feedback like, oh, this test wasn't actually given correctly. Let me explain why. Go
Right.
back and do it again because the data is invalid in that case.
Mhm.
And then, just like a couple pages, bulleted notes. This is where your first few OG lessons will start. But this is just the starting point. Then new data is coming in and we
Uh-huh.
are continuing to refine. And the other reason that I don't know if this might seem like a tangent is so a little bit later in college, I also ended up getting this group fitness certification and this started this side
Uh-huh.
work that I no longer do where I taught group fitness and yoga for
Neat.
15 years. And so much of that is to me, or maybe I'm also a bit of a klutz, so I've had a lot of physical therapy, is that so much of the work we do in movement, or if you visit a physical therapist, is we don't make assumptions based on a person's age or other factors that it might be once we analyze the body or where the pain is, you might have to do a very small, isolated exercise to not use other muscles and just hone in on the weak muscle. That is what we're doing in OG.
Uh-huh.
Often the students we work with have strong oral language skills. They might even unconsciously be compensating using those high oral language skills to fill in the gaps for words they can't read on their own. And they might get the gist of what they're reading. But what happens is, as these students progress in school, pictures disappear.
Yeah.
The number of multisyllabic words and very content specific words like photosynthesis or reconstructionist, those words are the most important for unlocking comprehension, but our students might not have the ability to accurately and automatically read those words. So that compensatory strategy that maybe worked in early elementary school is not working now. So to me, I feel like that all fits together in this diagnostic and prescriptive model. And I often tell the teachers that we're training, think of yourself like a physical therapist. Sometimes you might have to start with a really low weight, or I'm
Uh-huh.
in PT right now. I have to do this one legged calf raise, but I still do so many other exercise things. But that's what I need. So I then don't have pain when I do others.
Yeah. I think keeping the big picture in mind is such a key because sometimes people can get so caught up in like the minutia of all the little details. Oh, but what about this? Should this be in the scope and sequence or this thing that's more complex or not common or whatever, and kind of can't see the forest through the trees that these skills are in service of the ultimate goal of written expression, reading comprehension, and they're not like ends in and of themselves. So that's neat. Yeah.
That's so well said. I think, looking for
Mhm.
errors across lessons is really important.
Mhm.
Um, and that's really the heart of good instruction is being diagnostic and prescriptive. And I think that there is maybe just a more broader quest. I don't know if you experience this in Canada of let's find a teacher proof program. And if we find it, the program is going to solve all our problems.
Mhm.
We really just need teachers to be somewhat robotic
Yeah.
administering it or implementing it. But the
Mhm.
reality is definitely for our students who are struggling, who have dyslexia, that's
Mhm.
a program is never going to perfectly fit. I mean, that's the same reason you see a physical therapist and you don't just YouTube, I don't
Every
know, calf pain,
exactly.
and just you need to see a skilled practitioner. And I think actually the same is true for classroom teachers too, because
Mhm,
classroom teachers have to differentiate instruction and have small groups and whole group and know how to balance all of that. And so that diagnostic and prescriptive muscle, here, I'll go back to that PT analogy, we need to
mhm,
build that for all teachers, our special educators, our reading interventionists, our tutors, but classroom teachers too.
mhm. Yeah, I appreciate what you said about the program, and I think there's so many tensions, let's say, trying to educate or give PD to teachers to boost their knowledge so that you don't have to rely on a program. But let's say tier 3 or kids with learning disabilities, the comorbidities and individual profiles make it very hard for one program to kind of be a catch-all for such unique profiles. So it's such a tension, I find.
Yeah, and I don't think the solution is never buy a program. There's
No,
so many
agreed.
benefits, particularly
Yeah.
school-wide, so we have consistency, and not all programs are created equal. Just because something states it's science of reading or OG, or it does not mean we can trust it.
You have
We
to
have to
look
have a
at it.
healthy dose of skepticism, and often in my work, I am consulting with districts or looking at programs to help
Mhm,
them decide if it's worth purchasing.
mhm,
But at the end of the day, it's just like, again, if we went to a medical provider or your physical therapist, at the end of the day, what's guiding them is an understanding of the human body. So, what needs to guide teachers is an accurate understanding of how humans learn and specifically reading science as well. And I really hope that things are changing from when I was in graduate school over 20 years ago, that we really invest in scientific literacy and really understanding the science of learning.
mhm. Yeah, that's neat. I've been learning a lot about the science of learning myself and even trying to include some of that in trainings and conversation with teachers that, okay, we can know how to teach reading, but we have to know how to instruct effectively too. And there needs to be that mix between the two and work it out. But it's very interesting because when you look at something like effective principles of instruction, they very well align with things like OG principles and the structure of the OG lesson. So we're seeing a kind of a nice connection there, I feel. Yeah.
Absolutely.
What do you see as some differences in OG between when you first started and now in terms of your own practice or the community you're with or hot topics, things like that?
That's a really good question. So I initially started out in graduate school and after being a public school special educator. And then
Mhm,
later, when I worked under Sheila Costello, I was at a private school for students with language-based learning disabilities. And almost 13 years ago, I want to kind of give my background before I launch into that answer.
yeah, that's
And
all
then
right.
almost 13 years ago, my family moved to Vermont, and I'm so lucky that the Stern Center took a chance on me. Uh,
Mhm,
and I think a lot of my shifts in practice are a result at being at the Stern Center. So I just want to for a
mm,
moment talk about them.
sure.
It's an educational nonprofit located in Williston, Vermont. It's been around over 40 years. We have an amazing department of evaluators that provide comprehensive evaluations, speech and language pathologists that are providing services, sometimes also involved in evaluations because we know their expertise is really important too. That also provide services, social communication for those on the autism spectrum, customized instruction. Many are Orton-Gillingham instructors, that
Mhm,
some are teachers that did their training with us, with or there's a lot of cross communication. And then our professional learning department, within that I'm the director of the Orton-Gillingham Institute. And when I started at the Stern Center, there was one associate level course. The OG Institute had just started. It had recently become accredited a couple of years prior under Jean Foss, who is a founding OG fellow. And I'm just so proud now. Our associate level course is so popular. We have an interest list and an application and interview process because we just cannot keep up with the demand. We offer 3 introductory classroom educator courses.
Mhm.
And we have the titles different. We say associate level is OG for intervention, associate level. You have to do both the course and the practicum. So that's been a big shift is
Mhm.
maybe my experience over the years is and every place is a little different, but
Mhm.
I feel like if you're going to do an associate level course, you need to commit to the practicum too. This is to learn how to do OT as an intervention. But I don't believe in all or nothing or in letting perfection be the enemy of the good. And any entry point into this reading science is important. So we also offer introductory OG courses that meet the classroom educator OGA standards. They're also available for 3 graduate credits, which means it's a 45-hour
That's
course.
nice. Yeah.
And we've learned really from keep listening to teachers and feedback from schools. So we have one devoted to K through 2 and one that we call Intro OG for upper grades, for grades 3 plus, because the way we really felt just over time, we needed to have 2 different courses because what literacy instruction looks like in the general ed classroom is very different in the first early
Yeah.
grades of school when they're learning how to read versus really this type of instruction should not stop in 3rd grade, but it's going to change. It's going to be more sophisticated, a much bigger emphasis on morphology, prefixes, suffixes, roots. We want to empower even more vocabulary strategies. And so that I think has been a shift is maybe you would have a better view than me is I think there's more of an emphasis on getting OG in the general ed classroom as opposed to this is just a private tutoring and outside of the public school issue. And I really feel this is part of my life's mission is to get more OG into the public schools that there's enough children who struggle to read. This is the
Mhm.
gold standard, and it shouldn't matter how much money your family's bank account. All children have the
Yeah.
right to learn how to read.
100%. Yeah. Yay. I can't agree more. Slow progress, but I think the need is there. The concept of change is there. Have you heard of the Ontario Right to Read? Are you aware of that? Okay. So
I'm writing it down.
I'll give you a 60-second synopsis. So, some years ago, some parents of dyslexic children took to the Ontario Human Rights Commission a concern that their children with learning disabilities weren't getting their needs met. So, what's interesting in Ontario is that the Human Rights Commission has a strong role. And so, learning or learning disabilities is a protected ground that children, regardless of a profile, should have equal access and all that kind of thing. So, long story short, the Human Rights Commission did indeed find that the schools were not meeting the needs of children with dyslexia and learning disabilities and put out this report that has then generated similar types of investigations in parts of the Midwest in Canada and even like places around the world. It's kind of an influential document because it's one of the first, according to my understanding, one of the first human rights cases as opposed to like a legal case. So yeah, we're still working on that, getting all kids on board, but slowly. So what about, let's say, urgent, pressing issues, things that kind of crop up is like, I need to learn more about this, or this is my next step in my journey, that type of thing.
Well, these are such great questions, Cheryl.
Mhm.
So one thing that and so I often say we, so I want to know it's not just me at the Stern Center doing teacher training. I have an amazing assistant director, Amy Ducey, who is we really run the OG Institute together and a wonderful team of other OG fellows. Either they were trained by Sheila already at the Stern Center or we train them and now
Amazing.
they're clinical supervisors
That
or fellow in
community is
training.
lovely.
So
Yeah,
it's a really
so lucky.
beautiful community. And because so much of what we do is online, not everyone is in Vermont, and it's fine.
And then,
So
mhm,
one thing that Amy and I, who are both former elementary public school teachers, just keep noticing more and more when and we've really had the privilege. We've had a couple districts come to us. Actually, Amy was in a district in
mhm,
Vermont. And that's how I met her that said, we really want to bring this to the classroom and at different levels of multi-tiered system of support. So our special educators or reading interventionists are doing associate level and our classroom teachers are doing classroom educator. And maybe they didn't come with that plan, but they just came to say, we want to change what
We
we're
need
doing,
something.
talk us through.
Exactly.
And this is how it developed.
Mhm.
And so something we've just really seen over the years is for the classroom teachers, it's so much more than just coming in to observe a lesson. We really need to really look at the entire literacy block.
True. Flow of the day, everything.
Yeah, to make sure they have time for things. And we have created guidelines for the literacy block. One of the things that is non negotiable is read alouds. So even though that's not part of the OG lesson, or maybe you're not testing your students on letter sound correspondence, you are testing them on letter sound correspondence or pseudo word reading, but you're not testing them on the read aloud. You've got to do that read aloud and make it enriching
Or
and really,
language, the vocabulary.
yes, yes. And a couple years ago, really, Amy gets the credit for developing this workshop series called Around the Block, really about navigating and infusing the entire literacy block.
Mhm.
And that was the theme of our OGA conference presentation last year, was about creating a science of reading infused literacy block. And part of that is,
It was a good
now
presentation.
it seems somewhat obvious because I feel like Emily
Mhm.
Hanford gave us the permission to say the quiet
Yes.
out loud that we've all been saying behind closed
Yeah.
doors. We got to get the balanced literacy three cueing system out. We can't
Mhm.
in one part of the day be encouraging phonics
Mhm.
and then in another part of the day giving kids books that it's like, I am a lion, I am a lionfish, and
Mhm.
all the lines, all the
Yes.
sentences start the same
Mhm.
way, and a child that just knows what those pictures are. And I'm quoting from a specific book in a popular program that
Yeah.
I've seen go home with kids, that, you're unintentionally subverting all the good phonics instruction that was done at another time in the day.
Mhm.
So I think that's one thing we're helping schools to do. And that
Mhm.
can be a tough walk.
It's like the change management process is important, and it's not just adding like a silo of phonics and then going to other silos, let's say, or kind of compartmentalizing without helping to see those connections. And it's really a whole pedagogical shift as opposed to drips of things.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So something I'm really excited about is I did a private workshop series this year called Cultivating Comprehension. I like alliterations.
Hmm.
And really about going back to what you were saying about good instructional principles are really those OG principles:
Yep,
direct, explicit,
exactly.
and quoting Dr. Anita Archer about the importance of high student engagement and about just take a step back. Let's really look at the forest, not the specific trees. Is we
Hmm.
need to have a high level of student engagement at any time we are teaching, and how to really infuse more just rich vocabulary instruction throughout the day. We can't do everything all at once. For any listeners to say,
So
like, this
true.
just feels so much, just take on one thing, or for
Hmm.
school leaders, one initiative.
Yeah,
If maybe it's
over
having a
time.
decodable text library in the school for interventionists to use, or for the K classroom. Because if we do it right, students should not need decodable text by the end of second grade.
I think that's some misconception that they're there for a purposeful reason for instruction. Some kids maybe more than others, some kids significantly longer than others, but they're not the end goal. They are a tool for youth. So, yeah.
Yeah. So when you ask, like, where do I want to continue to grow and learn?
Hmm.
I really want to be a support to school systems making this change, because the professional development that we're providing, the coaching or the consulting with the school leaders, that's an important piece. But the hard work is really being done in school day in and day out. And I'm not there. And how can I best support them? And one of the most gratifying experiences is teachers that we've worked with over the years who've become principals and curriculum directors in districts. And when you've had that personal experience of working with a struggling student and seeing your instruction really work, you can't, I find that those school leaders, they have this passion of understanding that student sense of belonging, social, emotional, is completely wrapped up with
Hmm.
literacy. We cannot separate the two.
No, no, that's very true. Very true. And plus, it just gives a whole nother wealth of support for that school, those teachers, those families when you have that as part of your repertoire. Oh, that's good. All right. So, like, as we kind of like wrap up for today, what's piece of advice you'd like to share?
That's a good one too. So I typed up two of my favorite
Oh,
quotes. And the
awesome.
first one
Can't
is
wait to
again
hear them.
from,
Mhm.
I'm sorry, what, Cheryl?
I can't wait to hear them.
The first one is from Anita Archer. There
Good.
is no comprehension strategy powerful enough to
Mhm.
compensate for the fact you can't read the words.
Mhm. Yeah. Can't. Yeah. So true.
And I would really urge any school leaders or schools out there, be cautiously optimistic and have this healthy dose of skepticism around any curriculum you are looking to purchase. If any curriculum is
Mhm.
somehow suggesting that you can become a strong reader and you don't have to actually be accurate reading the words, run away from that program. Don't spend the taxpayer money on that. And the other one is from Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg: fight for the things you care about, but do it in a way that will lead others to join you.
Exactly. Well, that's so awesome. And I think that's kind of what I'm hoping these conversations will help do is people hear about OG, listen to just regular people learning about OG, studying it, becoming practitioners, showing by that representation that this is possible through the successes we see, and we can be those guiding people in to support our struggling learners is so key. So, yeah, well,
I
awesome.
agree, Cheryl. And I just wanted to put a plug for, I really believe there's an entry point for everyone. And the entry point is
Mhm,
not necessarily full OG course and a
mhm,
practicum. And a great entry point, well, one is your podcast. So thank you for doing this on top of everything else you're doing. The OG Academy newsletter is filled with excellent articles. A couple years ago, I wrote an article, a guide for schools looking to adopt the science of reading, with very helpful practical questions to ask when they're looking at a curriculum
mhm,
that maybe will be in the show notes. And recently in Vermont, our local chapter of the Reading League, the Vermont chapter, has put out a series of articles called Reading in Brief, written all by Vermont educators on different topics. Dr. Melissa Farrell, who works at the Stern Center, wrote several on assessment. And
mhm.
I was really privileged to be asked to be the editor of the morphology series. And so, again, lots of practical articles on
Yeah,
how to teach suffix spelling rules or how to teach TION.
right.
So anyone could just Google the Reading League Vermont chapter and find these articles chock full of practical, helpful information.
That's great. Well, thanks for sharing those resources and for all of your efforts in preparing them. So, well, thanks for being here, Peggy. It was great to chit chat and learn more about you. And I'm looking forward to our paths to cross at a conference or something else sometime soon. So, thank you.
Thank you. This was an honor.
Thank you for tuning in to the Learn Literacy podcast, your trusted source for learning how to teach literacy through language and structure. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the podcast with fellow educators and literacy advocates. For more information, visit learnliteracy.com and follow us on social media at LearnLiteracy1 for the latest updates. Together, we can empower every learner. Until next time, remember our goal of language for life.